Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're on it today.
Fuck yeah, we are, dude. I'm stoked because I worked for hours last night trying to put a story together and realizing it's fucking boring. And and people need to really learn. Like, since doing this show, I thought I was a fan of pirates, but I don't think I am, because I've multiple times now have tried to do another pirate topic, and they suck. There's just like no meat on them, you know?
That's the thing is, and I've had a couple pirates, and then like one was just like this naval admiral, like they've got one good story that takes about 30 seconds to tell, and the rest of it's like, oh, they sailed for the whatever.
Well, like, and I heard a thing while I was researching for said topic that I did not bring to the table because it sucked. But, you know, somebody said, like, you know, all the pirates you know about were probably the worst pirates because they got caught. And there were a lot of pirates.
Right, that's why we know about them.
There was a lot of pirates who did their shit and then just like vanished. And those were the ones who were probably really good at what they did and had really like detailed stories you would want to hear, but you'll never hear them because they were smart.
You know, I was thinking about that the other day, really, like how many, because we can get on this like whole like capitalism rant,
which we do.
I mean, I'm sure me and you could, yeah. But you think back to like the handful of families in this country that like spawned, you know, what they would call dynasties or whatever, because they came from money. And it's like, you know, some of these big companies like McDonald's might have its root in piracy. Like, I don't know the history of McDonald's.
And but you know what? The thing is about anybody who does have ties to piracy and their corporate lineage, it was less devastating than what they do on a daily basis to people.
Right. That's the thing is like, and that's exactly kind of what I was thinking is like, it starts from like, I wondered how many pirates like took their fortunes and just like became rich moguls. And then that went on to like carry on to present day. And that was the least terrible of the stuff that they've probably done. It's because, you know, the poetic story would be like, oh, they took their money and turned straight. It's like, no, they didn't. They turned to a different form of like thievery and that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's, I'm probably trying to be more smart than I actually am. Yeah. But my point is I was literally just thinking about that the other day. And so it's funny that you said that about how the good pirates, you know, you don't really hear about.
Yeah. And this one, you know, is like all set up to be like right up my alley of like, you know, a pirate who was involved in like an incredible thing, but he was also a bumbling fuck up. And I was like, well, that sounds cool. And then like half the story, it's just jumping around from like 8 other fucking pirate captains. And it's like, and then they went to Panama and shit. And it's like, get to the point where he fucked it up. You know, that's what I want to know. And maybe I'll bring it to the show when I can kind of.
I was going to say, we almost need like a compilation show of all these like topics, as we've talked about it before. I've had a few that are interesting, but not the right stories for a podcast format. And it's like.
I did learn about keel hauling, which was more.
Is that where they like tie you to the front of the ship?
They tie it. Well, they tie you from one end of the ship. The end goal is you are weighed down but tied to the back of the ship as you're dragged through the ocean.
Oh, cool!
It fucking fuck that. Put that in a pirates movie, Disney. But yeah, you know. So maybe I'll go back to it. But really, just it turned into a thing where fuck it, you got to do a pasta because you know. I put all my time into shit that didn't pan out. This is a Christmas-themed creepypasta.
Oh, there you go.
And that's all I fucking know about it. Sure. I would have brought this to you in June if that's all I could find. But this is called Santa's Other Workshop. There's not an author put on it. If we find one by the time... Oh, there it is. Kill a Hawk 1. So...
Kill a hawk, like, or kill a hawk?
It's like kill a hawk, and the only way I can tell that is because the... well, shit. I guess with the letter A, that wouldn't count. I was going to say it's not capitalized, but H and hawk and K and killa are. But
yeah, so it's probably kill a
hawk.
Space
yeah.
hawk.
When he's whooping your ass in Smash Bros, that's what you see. All right, so this is Santa's Other Workshop. Perpetual darkness lingered at the top of the world. Thick ice, frigid air, and snow covered the lifeless mountainscape. However, the endless night did not go unchallenged. A single source of light illuminated the sky and drove back the darkness. Nestled between two snow-covered mountains, a little cottage sat with puffy, billowing smoke rising from its chimney. Ignoring the fact that the nearest civilization was thousands of miles away, to the casual eye, the house was simply a warm and welcoming home. Still, one might ask themselves, what an odd thing to find in such a bleak place. How could such a thing come to be? Like most things found in the North Pole, not everything is as it appears. Most of the North Pole is as it appears, though. Like,
yeah, because it's ice
it's
and
ice.
snow.
It looks like ice. Yeah.
Yeah.
The land was unforgiving and cruel. It could take your life within minutes. Only a select number of creatures were given permission to live in this harsh and relentless wilderness. All others who entered this domain did it of their own accord, such as the residents of this tiny little home. However, these individuals were like no other, and with a little bit of magic at their disposal, they lived happy and joyful lives. Like, even if you're going to do a dark turn with Santa, like, you know, we all know who Santa is. You don't have to establish that he's magic to live in the North Pole. For centuries, children around the world found joy from the efforts of the hidden workshop. All year round, tiny magical hands toiled and labored to create toys and playthings for all the good children of the world. Elves, the last of the magical creatures from old, dwelt within its walls and used their mystical nature to create wondrous and joyful things for Christmas morning. 3 days after the winter solstice, the old man would put on his heavy coat and boots, take to the air, and deliver his Christmas joy to every last child. Which sounds really sinister.
How sad is it? I was just thinking, how sad is it? Like, I've never really thought of the elves as being like the last of a race that used to span the globe, and it's like, well, now our last refuge is with Santa as slaves.
Yeah. The more you think about it, like, I as you get older, it's like you either like, you either logically determine like, oh, magic's not real, fucking fat old guy can't do this, or I'd like to meet the kid who goes the other way, where it's like, no, Santa's evil, and because he makes the elves do all this shit.
Yeah, the elves don't get it. Like, Santa, in return, is a beloved character. He gets cookies and milk and whatever. The elves don't get shit.
And he does, like, one big job a year. He's really what I want to be. It's like...
It's basically the president of the United States. Like, everybody else does the actual work, and then you, like, sign your name to it.
Yeah, you gotta give, like, one fucking, like, State of the Union address, and Santa has to fly everywhere in one night. You know, so like, no matter how shit his night goes, it's one night, and then he's off for a year. It's pretty sick. Like everything in the cosmos, there must be a balance. For every night, there must be a day. Every beginning has an end, and with every kind child, there was a naughty little boy or girl to be found. Far below the bright lights, singing and happy elves creating and building new and fantastic toys, there was another workshop. There, the warmth of the hearthstones could not reach. While the purpose of the upper workshop was to bring happiness, the other was dark and sterile. It, too, had a purpose. It was here where the masses of cheap and easily broken toys were made. Which I thought it was going to get worse than that. In
Yeah, it's
the
like,
dark
you know,
dungeon, we make pieces of shit. You know,
we spread pestilence and disease. It's like, we make it. This is where the toys that were manufactured in China come from.
There was no love put into these objects. Never would a child's eyes brighten with wonder and awe upon seeing these gifts on Christmas morning. In his wisdom, the old man knew that even a naughty child should not be forgotten during this time of goodwill. However, the old man was no fool, and had no desire to waste his resources on such unsatisfying tasks. Fuck him. He doesn't do anything. It's not his resources.
Well, it's just that typical slave owner thing where he's like, the slave resources are mine. Like, they're...
This is my labor. Am I not entitled to my labor? This responsibility was handed to the banished and exiled elves. What the fuck is going on in the North Pole?
And I loved the idea, like, of banished and exiled elves. Like, do they have to do something bad, like murder, or because they're like elves in Santa's workshop, is it just like you drop your hammer on your toe and you go, oh fuck, and he's like, you cussed, you're banished.
Yeah.
Like, none of that foul language here. Like, I'm curious what they're
fucking elves
like,
smothering other elves with pillows and stuff over some fucking... It's like prison, you know, just constantly fighting each other while like one guard just doesn't give a shit. This responsibility was handed to the banished and exiled elves that inhabited the deepest bowels of the workshop, below the workshop. Those with selfish hearts and greedy desires, stripped of their immortality, they wasted away in the dark with only the trinkets and flimsy materials to pass the time. Oh God. I shouldn't have picked this one. I'm never going to be able to say this. Ergra Ita sat in the poorly lit corner of a tattered workbench. I don't know. People fucking try to do Lovecraft shit and it can't be done.
I just like it. I was just thinking it's karmic payback for all the... Although yours is actually probably impossible to pronounce. Mine is something like Tom, but just in like Russian. And it's like, yeah.
Well, I
think
the way I read it, most people would be like, yeah, that's how you say it. But it's one of those things with like Lovecraftian names and stuff where it's like the author would be like, no, it's pronounced a fragratita. And it's like, what the fuck is a flagra? So that's a medication.
I thought it was a type of like sports coupe. The Flagra EX.
All right, so it's some dude named Ergra. His focus was entirely devoted to the old and worn piece of brass in his hands. The clangs of his hammer hitting metal rang out and echoed through the dark halls and passageways. He pounded the brass sheet relentlessly until the metal slowly began to surrender its shape and bend to Ergra's design. Suddenly, the hammer flew out of the mad elf's grasp. He examined his limp hand, trying to will it back into his control. So him and many other sad souls on porn sites. Am I right, fellas?
I was just thinking Erga's limp hand sounds like a ska band.
Fury filled his heart as he watched the necrotic flesh sloughed off his bony hand. He didn't have much time. His other hand was weak, but still capable of grasping. He reached into his toolbox and removed a long warped nail and stabbed it into the back of his paralyzed hand. He pushed on the nail head until its tip broke through the skin and emerged through his palm. Immediately, the pain surged and shot up his arm. The thick and rigid tendons loosened with his hand, giving him temporary use of his digits once more. The elf picked up his hammer and resumed molding the shape of the brass plate. With each impact upon the brass, he poured his rage into his creation. It's basically Sauron.
Yeah.
You know, if Middle-earth was all just about Santa Claus.
Toys. Yeah.
Gandalf was Santa, and he started all this shit. How ironic that the product of his tireless work was meant for the ones he hated the most. His deteriorating body was fading fast. He possessed just enough magic to fuel the curse he would cast upon the object. When finished, his gift would be placed with the other junk toys and cheap trinkets. It would make its way to them and find a child on Christmas morning. The curse will take hold and slowly begin tearing apart their lives. It'll channel their essence back to him and reignite his immortality. The object would pass from one child, then to another, century after century. He had just enough magic left to evoke his curse. Urgra had once lived and worked above. Like any other elf before him, he loved nothing more than to create beautiful and wondrous toys and gizmos. However, in his heart, he wished that he could keep some of his creations for himself. What a piece of shit, right? For, wanting things.
That you made yourself.
Yeah, to think, hey, this is cool. And it's you're jealous. It's no, I'm the manufacturer. I get to fucking keep some of this shit. One day, his eyes fell upon a beautiful music box his friend Delilah had created. The music box was extraordinary, meant as a gift to a king's firstborn. It was magnificent, crafted from oak wood. It bore an elaborate golden design on each of its sides. When opened, a figurine of 3 children danced hand in hand to a beautiful lullaby around a magnificent Christmas tree. Fucking let him keep it. That sounds like shit.
Yeah.
If I was a king's firstborn and you gave me that...
Well, he's probably got 37 of them anyway.
Yeah, and if you gave me that, I would have you hanged. This... I feel hey, you give this to royalty? I want a ball or something. Urgra Ita had never desired anything more in his entire life. It filled his heart with jealousy. He became resentful that this precious and rare treasure would go to an undeserving human infant. The little girl didn't deserve it. It should go to him, he thought. So under cover of darkness, Urgra slipped into the work area and took the music box. The one thing you can definitely hide from other people is the thing that makes sound. Unable to sleep and anxious to put the finishing touches on his prized creation, Delilah decided to return to the workshop. To his surprise and shock, he caught the elf attempting to steal the special music box. Delilah was enraged, for greed and thievery amongst elves were extremely offensive and not tolerated. Urgra begged his friend not to report his transgression, but Delilah was a fucking snitch. He was unmoved by the pleas and turned to tell the others of Urgra's crime. Desperate, Urgra did the only thing left for him to do. He grabbed a hammer and brought it down on his friend's head over and over again, which is really doubling down when you're in trouble.
But it's a very, I read those kind of stories in the newspaper all the time.
Well, this would be the equivalent of shoplifting a candy bar and pulling a gun when you're busted and shooting the clerk. It's you took it to an 11. You didn't need to. It was a slap on the wrist. All right, so he fucked up Delilah. Despite his meticulous efforts to conceal his crime, it was a fucking hammer murder. What? How do you cover that up? He could not escape.
I don't have a hammer. I use a mallet. Sorry, looking for somebody else.
I would never beat my friend to death. He could not escape the sight and wisdom of the old man. Humiliated and dishonored, the elf was banished from the workshop, and his precious music box was taken from him and given to the little princess. Stripped of his immortality, Urgra Ita was cast into the cold and dark corridors of the other workshop to spend his remaining days, never to create a beautiful thing again. As the seasons passed, his hatred for all children grew and ate away at his sanity. What the fuck did children do? This was all fucking elves and Fat Man, alright?
Right.
You don't have to fucking take it out on us. He gritted his teeth knowing that the children of man were given everything and he had nothing. Hunched over his work, Urgra feverishly worked to complete his masterpiece. He stared down at the anvil and hammered down on the brass. Each strike brought the faces of a child into his mind. It lives in warmth. The blunt hammer formed the metal into a hollow cylinder. It stuffs its face with sweets and treats. Stumpy legs were welded into place. It gets everything it asks from Mummy and Daddy. A malformed head and crooked ears took shape. It gets anything its little heart desires. The brass surface was scrubbed of debris and grime. It gets everything it wants. Small turquoise stones were affixed to the brass body. I hate it. One glimmering red ruby stone was bound to the left side of the figurine's head. I hate it. Finally, a second red ruby was embedded into the surface on the face's other side. I hate them all. In the glow of the fire, Urgra held up the brass figurine. It was a disturbing representation of a rabbit. That's his fucking big plan. I'm gonna make a brass rabbit. I'm gonna make a cursed bun here. Its body was a lattice of crisscross brass strips, bejeweled with a pale blue turquoise stone at each intersection. Its head was malformed and gave the impression of a dead thing instead of a pleasant rabbit full of life. He placed the atrocious thing upon an open silver locket that contained a mirror on each of the hinged inner sides. With the rabbit figurine facing one of the mirrors, he carefully opened a vial that held a clear fluid. It was lymph. The lymph from an elf was the source of a magic that flowed through their bodies like that of blood from the second set of unique arteries found within its own circulatory system and pumped by a very special second heart. You guys just said it was its blood. I don't.
Yeah.
You didn't have to, I don't need a biology lesson about fucked up goblin elves. Only a few tiny drops fell out of the vial. It splashed onto the figurine and mirrored locket, illuminating them with a golden glow. Urgra closed his eyes and spoke the words of Wormwood in his elven tongue. The clear liquid turned black and stained the surface of both the rabbit statuette and silver locket. The glow turned a deep purple, then slowly faded. Pleased with the outcome, he gently placed a cloth over the object without making eye contact to obscure it from sight, and ever so carefully placed it in a small box decorated with holiday cheer. Finished.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah. The thing is, I kind of want this thing. That'd be a pretty cool gift. Finished with his work, Urgra turned to leave, pushing past the corpses of several elves hanging upside down from the support beams of the other workshop. Why? To remind them they're dying?
Ambience. Yeah.
Their lifeless bodies... And that's another thing. They just established that the good elves were immortal. How did he kill his friend?
I almost said that back then, but I don't...
You should have, because I'm pissed now. I found a plot hole, and I'm upset. Finished with his work, Urgra turned to leave, pushing past the corpses of several elves hanging upside down from the support beams of the other workshop. Their lifeless bodies drained completely of every last drop of magical lymph from slit throats. Urgra's calculation had been correct. He had just enough magic to fuel the curse placed on the object. The mad elf smiled and began to laugh. For the first time...
So are they implying that he, hung and killed these elves to get their magic out of them, or...
I guess that makes sense. I mean, he calculated something, I guess. So,
yeah, and there seems to be zero oversight down in this other
yeah,
workshop.
It's like, go fucking murder each other, you little freaks. For the first time in a very long time, Urgra's heart filled with anticipation at the approach of Christmas morning. The little girl sat in a large pile of torn wrapping paper from the many gifts she found under the Christmas tree. On the morning of December 22nd, Gabby awoke earlier than everyone else. Is that a thing? Why would she... It's December 22nd.
I don't know, that's a couple days early there, but that's all right. Maybe that'll be addressed.
She woke way earlier than everyone else. She went downstairs and glared at the many presents that continuously tempted her. It was as if they teased and mocked her every time she looked at the colorful and beautiful wrapping paper. She would receive such a terrible scolding from her parents, but she couldn't wait any longer. At first, it would only be one gift she opened. Then it became two, then another, and another. Before she knew it, all of her presents had been opened. Despite getting everything she asked for, the desire for more was still not satisfied.
So yeah, it's not Christmas. She's just...
Well, why would you put all the presents under there on the 22nd? Who are you trying to impress?
Right.
When Gabby stood, a small gift next to the base of the Christmas tree caught her eye. She could have sworn it had not been there before. The wrapping paper was worn and yellowed with age. Written in big words was a tag that said, "To Gabriella." It was like no other, and she surely would have seen it before now. Puzzled, she removed the wrapping paper and found a box that contained a smaller sealed box and a scroll. She opened the scroll and read, "Congratulations, lucky one. You are the proud owner of Pepe the Rabbit. Pepe loves you and will be your best friend in the whole world. Pepe is a friend like no other, and he will give you everything your heart desires. To be Pepe's friend, you must listen to him and never disobey the following instructions. Place Pepe on his locket facing the mirror. Never look Pepe in the eyes. He is ever so bashful and only likes to see you through his mirror. You may ask anything of Pepe 3 times. In 3 days' time he will grant any and all you asked of him. Never look Pepe in the eyes. It bears repeating. He does not like it and will be upset if you disobey this rule. Remember, lucky little boy or girl, Pepe loves you. He loves you more than anyone else in the whole wide world. Pepe will make sure that no one will hurt you ever again, and if you love Pepe, you will listen to him and do whatever he asks of you. Pepe loves you, and no one can ever come between you and him. Pepe loves you." The end.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like something a predator would say to groom their victim.
Yeah, totally. Pepe, no one's going to believe you if you tell him Pepe did this. Like, yeah. There's a little picture. They did a little fucking sculpture on the story. So you'll see that when we link it in the episode description. Kind of just looks like a ball of vomit. But, but also, like, good oversight. Again, I blame Santa. Like, you should know what the fuck you're putting under trees, bitch.
Well, and I get, like, it started out where it kind of tracked, where it's like, oh, well, even the bad kids deserve something, but it should be shit, cheap and flimsy and or whatever. But, like, it seems like an awful, like, error in judgment to doom elves to, like, work to their death. Like, literally, as their bodies fall apart, you sentence them to that. But then just assume that whatever they make will be safe to give to children. Like, it's like, you guys aren't safe enough to live in elf society.
He's literally been
but whatever you make
throats as soon as we put him down there. Maybe this guy shouldn't make shit for toddlers.
But whatever you guys make while you're down there, we won't even inspect it. We'll just go ahead and deliver it, no questions asked.
Yeah. I don't know. It's probably pretty hard to get like a good horror idea out of Santa Claus. But I respect the effort on this one. I'll never let it go though. Now that that other elf shouldn't have died if they're immortal. And that's not something this writer did. Like he didn't invent that. A lot of like fiction does that, where it's like it's an immortal race unless they're murdered. And it's like that's like the number one way to die. Like
that's kind of why I didn't question it, is because I knew it's common for that to be like, oh, you're mortal, but you can still be slain. Like, I mean, how many times have we seen that in like Souls games and stuff? But I think
there's a difference between being immortal and being perpetually dead. That's what those Souls games are. Like, you're always fucked.
Well, yeah. But then I was trying to decide, like, which would I like better? The elf's immortal, so he gets bashed to death with a hammer, but like just
has to live like that.
The next day wakes up and he's fine. Yeah, he's just got like maybe that's why he didn't actually murder his friend. They just said he attacked him with a hammer,
fucking like meat pudding.
Right. He's up there still trying to make toys, but his head is just like a Picasso painting.
You can live forever, but nobody said your brain would work the whole time. Yeah, that's probably darker.
Santa banished that elf too, just to put him out.
Just because he was uncomfortable with him.
Yeah.
He's like, can we put him in the other workshop?
He's like, well, you're going to the other workshop for deadly assault and attempted theft, and you just tempted him with your music box that was just too tempting, so you're guilty too. Get out of here, meathead.
Can we please put him in the other workshop? He's staring at me. I hate it. It's like, all right, Santa.
And you know he, like, referred to him as Hamburger, the elf, and just laughed about it, too, because Santa's, like, a callous asshole. He's like,
yeah, it's like
Hamburger, the elf.
I mean, I think about it a lot. Like, Rudolph, like, Santa only gave a shit when fucking he needed something, He did not give a fuck about that freaky, weird, awful reindeer with his fucked up nose that was so fucking red and so odd, and he didn't show any compassion to that little freak
until it got foggy,
and
then he's like, well,
like, hey, I need a headlight. I got a busted headlight.
Yeah. My magic, I can fly and I can deliver presents around the world, but I can't.
Rudolph, you fucking monster, get out here. Okay. I love Christmas. What a fun time of the year.
I had to double check while we were talking there too. Make sure that was the end of the story, the instructions with Pepe, because that seemed kind of.
I feel like it needs more elaboration. Like, how the hell does Pepe curse you?
Right?
It's like,
I mean, like I said, it was very clear that,
like,
it was very clear that Pepe sounded like a predator, like we said. But it was that's just where it ends. Like,
well, it might tie into something else. This was made for like a contest or something in the Creepypasta community, and you've had a couple stories too where they like reference some inside shit that.
Yeah, so like maybe Pepe
might be a character in another thing.
Yeah,
and this was a prequel, which is a great idea.
It got my hopes up. I was waiting for the little girl to like axe murder her whole family or something.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that's where it was going, but then it's just like,
Yeah.
Don't look it in the eyes.
Yeah, well, you know what? This is what happens when there's no, like, when we're allowed to bring our own topics to the show. Guaranteed to let you down by the end.
You know how screwed I would be if I got a cursed toy that, like, the first thing it says is don't look it in the eyes, because you know what I would immediately do.
I'd be like, that's bullshit. I'm tough enough. And then, like, have my soul drained from me. But anyway, that's the story this week. Yeah. We should just end it there.
Yeah, we like to end strong.